Okay, so as I talked about in last week, we've been working out on the web, and most of what we've been doing actually everything we've been doing is based in the browser. And so now we're actually going to move to you setting up your local dev environment, and there's two pieces of software that you need to have. VS Code. Now, if you are already have some web development experience and you have your own editor and you're okay using it, cool. As long as you're also comfortable with Git. And if not, definitely come and ask me about that. So, the point of this is that we're going to be moving to working locally. And to do that, we're going to install two pieces of software. But before we do that, there is something I want you to know how to do. And just in general, it's good. Now, if you're on Windows, you can go over to your start. Now, I actually happen to be using Windows 11 right here, but this is generally also true for Windows 10. And if I go up, I can either click here and I can find PowerShell. Notice it's there, but I could type PowerShell here. I have it pinned locally. But if I run it, this is going to give me a command prompt. Okay. Now, there's a reason I want you to have this before we install anything. And then over here on another tab, I've shown you how on the Mac, how you can do it is you basically can also just go to Finder and type terminal, and you will get something similar. So in whatever command line you use for your operating system, okay, I want you to do the following command. I'm going to type git, which remember we're using GitHub, but now we're going to install Git on our local systems, that space dash dash version. This will create an error if you do not have Git already installed, because there may be, for whatever reason, based on what you've already installed on your system, you may already have it. So I'm going to do that, and it's going to say, nope, I can't find it. Okay, so that validates for me that I do not have Git on this system, and I can proceed with this. By the way, even if you do, and you happen to have an older version, we'll see in a minute what version is current, it probably would be good to also install it there, install a newer one as well. Okay, let's come back here. So I'm preparing for the install. So I'm going to first install VS Code, which is the editor we're going to use, or I'm going to use. What will happen here is based on your operating system, it will change to the most current stable version. There is something called the insiders version, but for our purposes, definitely just stick with this. And what you will see is this program will update over time very often. It updates a lot. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click here. And then what it will do is automatically start downloading. Okay, so that's going to download, and it's pretty quick. My internet's pretty fast. So hopefully at this point you've had experience installing software, but because this is an exe file, right, I can just click on it and it will run. If you want to go look at where that file is located, you can see it here. I can see that it's in the browser and how big it is. Not important at this point, but we'll just go ahead and, by the way, I can click here or back over in, oh, it already disappeared by me going in there. So in here, I could just click on it. You could also just click on that inside the browser. So now what's happening is that I'm going to go through the process of setting up VS Code. And I'm going to agree, which, by the way, this is the long agreement you're signing off. And as you can tell, I read every word, and that shouldn't be a joke, but it is kind of. The EULA, the End User License Agreement, is something that now there's software to scan this, to tell you if there's anything you're agreeing to that's not a good idea. But I'm going to agree because I just want to get it done. It's going to tell me where it's going to put it. It's going to give me an icon. Cool. Now at this point, I have a couple of choices. I can add something to my Windows Explorer. I'm not going to. You can. I could create a desktop icon. I'm probably just going to pin mine down here because I use VS Code all the time. I am going to add it to its path. I will register code as an editor for supported files. Yes, so any related files, which we'll see in this class. Okay, and then that, boom, is done. So that will run fairly quickly and install VS Codes. While that's happening, let me come back over here and just go ahead and download. I think it was already done, but I'm going to come to here and just have this ready to go. Because for a Mac, this is going to be a little different. For Windows, you just download this file. For the Mac, what I found, and I just recently, because I don't know if I said this, but my primary device, desktop platform that I use is Mac OS. So I happened to get a newer Mac recently. And that command I showed you, git dash dash terminal on the Mac, installed it for me. Or install it triggered an install. So if you want on your Mac to see if you have Git already, okay, you can do that command over in terminal, like I showed you how in the terminal, and you could do that git dash dash version that you saw me do in here, so git dash dash version. And if you don't have it, it'll actually install it through Xcode. So that's the way you do it there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go over here, and I'm going to go ahead and have this start downloading while I go look at. I'm going to minimize this. That's going to start downloading. Oh, I have to actually select which one. Now for me, I have a 64-bit Windows setup. And how you find that out, if you don't already know, okay, you can go, actually the best way is on Windows is actually just go to your File Explorer, right click on this computer, go to Properties. I showed you this when we were doing the assignment last week, but it's good to review. And this is a 64-bit operating system with a 64-bit processor. And hopefully you studied this a little bit in CIT 15 if you took it, which most of you probably did. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and choose the 64-bit version, let that download. While I come over here, again, I'm kind of moving back and forth. I'm going to go ahead and finish it. Okay, so now VS Code is now installed on my system, and it's great. You can select different themes, which is awesome. I typically like the dark theme. That's kind of the one I like. And then at this point, we're going to do some more work in here in a minute, but I just want to show you that terminal, if you do new terminal, is built right in here to VS Code. Now we're going to end up getting a new terminal if you want to use it. For Windows users, you could continue to use PowerShell with Git, and I'll show you that. But we're also going to, as part of our install of Git, there will be another terminal interface or commands we could use with what's called Git Bash. And you'll see this in a minute. One thing I want to have you turn on right away, though, before we do anything else, and we'll do a little, like here's your Explorer. So if you're looking at files, if you want to find something, version control, which we're going to learn on the command line, if you want to debug, if you want extensions. So that's just that quick interface. But up at File, I want you to go over, and there should be an autosave. And autosave is just handy because anytime you want to save something, just let it autosave. So let me show you well, actually we'll do that as we get into doing a little file, but I could show you what that looks like. Okay, so now that I have this installed, I'm good to go. I'm going to go ahead and close it for a second. I'm going to go back to the browser because I now have this, which is my Git. Now this is going to require a few more steps to answer, or a few more options to answer. So let's walk through this now as well. I was just reading about, I didn't know if PowerShell, if it came with Windows already. I read that somewhere, but you do need to install the full Git. So I clicked on Open Git. Do you want, it's going to change your system? I'm going to say yes. I wouldn't have you install something that's not very well known, very well used by many people. If there was any issues with it, I would trust we would hear about it. Okay, we'll say yes. I'll minimize this so we can just see what the questions are. We have to, again, read through the licensing agreement. Fast, a lot more here than the other one. We'll hit next. This is where it's going to install it into. Now this is where we have a lot more options here. I typically do Windows integration, Git Bash, which I told you was a terminal. Associate the Git configurations with the default text editor. Yeah, so anytime it sees that, shell commands will be run with bash. This is all good. We'll hit next. Yeah, we'll let that happen. Use Vim. Now I am going to say here, use Visual Studio code as the default Git editor. If you have another editor, you could choose that. I wouldn't leave that as Vim, right? I would change that since we're installing VS Code. Adjust the name of initial branches. We'll let Git decide that, and you'll learn about branches later. Git from the command line. Yeah, all good. Open open SSH. Won't use it for this class, but good to have it. Use the library for open SSH. This is talking about the file types or the way it's going to do returns, I believe. Yeah, commit Unix line endings. Tiny is another little terminal program. Man, they're bundling a lot more with Git these days. Default fast-forward and merge, nothing we need to worry about. Okay, credentials. So this is good. We're going to go ahead and let the Git credentials, and you'll see what that means. Basically, because we're going to have to get onto GitHub and authenticate through our VS Code Git configuration. Enable caching. Wow, so many questions. I'm not going to do any of the experimental stuff, and then boom, we're done. Now, I need to let it install here. And then the last thing I'm going to show you before we move on off this video is just how you can confirm that Git is installed correctly, and then just what VS Code would look like a little differently if you're using the Git bash interface. Okay, so we'll go ahead. I don't need to do that. I'm going to hit finished. Now, in doing this, we actually got a whole new program loaded on our system. This is the GUI, which I don't recommend. This is the bash itself. So like I sent you into PowerShell, you can also just run git bash here by itself. I'm not going to do it that way. I'm just going to show you it's there. Because now, I didn't load VS Code yet on here. There we go. I'm going to pin this to start. The reason I'm going to, not to start, sorry. I'm going to pin it to the task. I meant to pin it down there. Doesn't matter. So I can just do VS Code right here. I'm going to pin that to my taskbar. I like it. I like things down here. I don't know why. It's just the way I like it. So now I'm going to open VS Code. And in VS Code, we haven't opened any folder. We'll do that next. But while we are here, notice the terminal. I'm going to go ahead and hit close it, because I just want you to see when I go up to terminal, it will default into PowerShell. But if you down arrow here, you can use git bash. And that's that same interface that we saw over at just using it from the direct command itself. So now VS Code has integrated git bash into here. So the last thing I'm going to have you do is now do that command git -- version, which should show you have Git installed into the integrated terminal in VS Code, and you're ready to move on. And then we'll learn more about that autosave next. Okay, hope this helped you out. Talk to you in the next one.